Well, last week on Tim's birthday, while we were recording the 2030 Agenda episode, Godfried Danneels, the Cardinal from Belgium, died. And Danneels is one of the ringleaders of the Sankt Gallen Mafia. And since he has passed away, Tim and I said, yeah, we should do a show on the life and legacy of Danneels. And in our opinion, not a good one. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
It's got some shame in it.
It's not good. So, no. First off, he was the Cardinal of Brussels. Isn't he also from the Louvain?
Yeah, he did time at the Louvain as well, as he studied Catholic theology at the Greg, whilst living in the Belgian Papal College, Louvain, with which he remained in love his entire life, opened the world for him intellectually. So he was there at the Higher Institute of Philosophy at Louvain to follow a 3-year course of neo-scholastic philosophy first. Then he went to the Greg, I believe. So,
right.
Neo-scholastic.
Yeah, I don't like Neo much of anything. Neo anything.
Oh.
Neo in the Matrix. He's kind of cool.
Yeah. But he's just his own word. He's not a prefix.
Right.
Neo as a prefix is trouble.
I like paleo-scholastic.
Me too.
When someone reads my bio, I want them to read, he spent 5 years studying paleo-scholastic philosophy.
Yeah. Or just scholastic philosophy. But paleo. Right. Paleo's good.
So he got his bachelor's in 56, his license in 58, and his doctorate in 61. And, I just finished up this book, turning the manuscript last night to Sophia
Congrats.
Institute. Feels good. It's called Infiltration. Working title, not official, Infiltration, the 200-year plot to destroy the Catholic Church from within. And I knew it already, but doing research for this book, man, the Catholic institutions in the 1950s had already been devastated. If you were studying philosophy or theology in the 50s in Rome, the modernist agenda by 56, to be sure, had taken deep root. Yeah.
In preparation for the council.
In preparation. Well, you see, I go through it in the book, but Pius XII, he starts getting really sick around 54 or 55. Before that, his confessor and spiritual director is a guy named Gerard de Laurier. He helped write the dogmatic definition of the Assumption of Mary in 1950. He was a hardcore Thomist. He was a really close friend of Lefebvre. He just can't take Vatican II at all. He was part of the Ottaviani intervention in 69.
Right.
So, he's right there on the good points. Unfortunately, as he gets really old in the 80s, he goes sede vacantis. Actually, he's technically not sede vacantis. He's sede privationist. Have we talked about that before?
I think we made one distinction in one show. Never clearly, no.
So Gerard de Laurier, he taught this thing called sede privationist, where Paul VI and John Paul I and John Paul II were materially the Pope, but not formally the Pope. So he's kind of taken the matter form distinction and like stretching it. And I don't know if that works, but he brought forth the sede privationist thesis. And you know what? If you were a sede vacantis, I'd go with this, because then you got cardinals to elect a new pope one day. It's kind of like the church is going on in like ghost form, but it's not formally the hierarchy.
Yeah, that's actually, I don't think the office of the Pope is divisible. I think the office of the Pope is hylomorphist.
Right.
So I don't think this is right, but it's much more convenient. That's definitely sure.
Right. Well, anyway, he had been the confessor for Pius XII, early mid-50s. Then he got rid of him, and he he appointed Cardinal Bea as his spiritual director and confessor. Now, Bea was a Jesuit. He's an arch-liberal. Everybody kind of knows Bea because Malachi Martin was his secretary.
Right.
And that's the story where he was, as we always kind of recreate it in an audiobook version, where Malachi Martin was making cappuccinos and teas in the back room, and he had a tray. Yeah. He was coming into the room, and he had to cool his heels at the door because they were reading the Third Secret of Fatima.
Right.
And then they showed it to him or whatever.
With the little apron, a little kiss the chef apron or whatever, coming in and out. Muffins, boys.
Right. Yeah. Or like one of those kind of lewd aprons that has Michelangelo's David on it.
Yeah.
They sell those in Italy and all the shops.
Yeah. Yeah.
While we're on that topic,
I know those.
When I was doing research for this book, I went through all the accounts of opening the Third Secret with John the 23rd in 1959. Mm-hmm. And they're all agreed that it happened at Castle Gandolfo. And the dates. Yeah, but when you read Malachi Martin's account, it seems to be back at the Vatican at a different time with different people. For example, the original one, the translator was a Portuguese curia member. I think it's an archbishop or a bishop. Where in Malachi Martin's version, it's 2 Portuguese seminarians.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Right. So when you compare, I go through in the book and compare it, and there might have actually been 2 readings. That's my new theory, right? That's the scholars always, when there's discrepancies, you have to create 2. And I think that might be going on there because it doesn't seem that Cardinal Ottaviani was present at the first one at Castle Gandolfo, but it seems that he did read it later back at the Vatican. So there might have been
really?
I think there was a second reading. I think there was one amongst friends out at Castle Gandolfo on vacation. They're sitting around having drinks. Like, what do you guys want to do tonight? I don't know. Open the Third Secret. Check it out.
Peel it back, bro. Yeah.
So anyway, back to Pius XII in the 50s. Cardinal Bea became the spiritual director of Pius XII, I think, until his death in 58. And Bea, he's a modernist, man. He's at least a crypto or neo-modernist. And I really think he, Bugnini, and Montini, those 3 guys, that's the triumvirate who were circling the dying body of Pius XII from 55, 56 to 58. And a lot of bad things and bad people were set in place in the church at that time. So by the time you get to 1963 and you're doing Vatican II, a lot of those people are already established, like Bea, who plays a key role in the council. Obviously, Montini is going to play a key role in the council because he becomes Paul VI.
Right.
It might also be during this time that Montini, who becomes Paul VI, is meeting with Saul Alinsky in Milan.
Montini was meeting with Saul Alinsky?
3 times. It's all in the book.
No way.
It's in the book.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Saul Alinsky.
Find that? That's
Saul Alinsky himself says it.
Really?
Yeah. Jacques Maritain, who is a friend of Saul Alinsky, sets the meeting up.
Oh, that rat. Yeah,
because Montini, Paul VI, was sort of a philosophical disciple of Jacques Maritain.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
In fact, Credo of the People of God, Paul VI document, was written by Jacques Maritain. Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff here, folks. I found so much crazy connections and info in the 1950s, the 1960s, 1970s. So much of it circles around Montini.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a long way of saying when Danneels got his degrees in 56, 58, and 61, the faculties in Rome, I mean, honestly, throughout Europe, but especially in Rome, had already been subverted.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember, we've said it a few times on the show here, but when he was eventually at the Greg was the launch point. If he was there in 59, 58 and 60, did he do his Greg? He did his license and his PhD at the Greg right? If he was there in 58 and 61, then that's prime prep time for the council.
Yes.
And remember, the Shadow Council at the Pontifical Gregorian University was launched many of the nights per week during the ongoing council itself between 1962 and 1965. I think it was mainly front-loaded that they would do Shadow Council. Right. It was at the again. I didn't know this as I was stalking the halls, but it's interesting stuff because so much that is midnightly and frightening, really, within the church that was launched from, beneath, under the surface, subterranean, was launched from the Pontifical Gregorian University. Anyway, yeah, and it's not surprising that he did his time there because so many of these guys did.
Yeah. Speaking of the Greg, I was reading this biography of Marcel Lefebvre just because I'm trying to figure out this issue, and when he was in Rome and he was studying, this was like over late 20s, I think. This is like during when Pius XI signs the Lateran Treaty, and basically with a guy named Mussolini. Man, what a disaster that whole thing was. Yeah. Pius XI's like, okay, we're finally going to reconcile with the secular Freemasonic Italian government. Who's going to come over and sign the accord with us? Oh, this new guy, Mussolini.
Yeah.
It doesn't look good.
You guys give him a chance. I think he'll turn out all right.
Yeah, right. Because I really feel good about this one. Let's go ahead and lock arms with Mussolini's Italy. But anyway, that happened. There was in Rome, seminarians were having a really hard time with this. Because if you remember, Pius IX was stalwart on it. Leo XIII was stalwart on it. Pius X, as we mentioned last time, he gave the Ubi et Orbi his first papal blessing with his back to the city, not facing the city.
Right.
So there was a serious symbolic, liturgical, political sit-in rebellion from the popes against this Italian city-state. And all the seminarians were like, rah, 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 we love this. So when Pius XI signed that, a lot of the clergy and a lot of the seminarians in Rome were kind of shocked.
Yeah.
And from what I can pick up, I'm kind of reading between the lines, the people at the Greg were in favor of it. Right.
So it's a smart guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the French seminarians, of whom Lefebvre would have been among, and those professors were opposed to it, because they had lived on, they kind of were coming out of the Third Republic of France and, Napoleon III, they remember all of that under Pius IX. So they're like, screw the secular Freemasonic countries. Let's stand firm. And then when Pius XI signs the Lateran Treaty with Mussolini, they all feel deflated. So, I mean, that's the Greg going back into 1929.
Wait, was Mussolini an active Freemason? Oh, you got tea today, not coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, I got tea. I've been doing tea more in the mornings. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and by the way, everybody, both of us are doing alternative headgear today. We're trying something new. We're in our life journeys, we're trying out new things. My liberal friends tell me every day I should try out new things. I don't actually have any liberal friends, but
I'm trying to encounter wireless earbuds, and Tim is encountering his new headset.
Encountering the football commentator.
That's right.
Mike.
You look like I don't know, because I don't watch that much football. Yeah,
old John Madden, Troy Aikman. Now, yeah,
Troy Aikman.
It's an encounter.
It's an encounter with technology. He was ordained in 1957. So right there at the end of Pius XII. And, my take on all this is Pius XII was really strong. Pius XII is the Pope of Fatima. He did so much good for the church, but really in the late, as I already said before, those late 54. He started getting these stomach problems. They were even pumping his stomach, Tim. They had, and then back then, I don't know what kind. It was like a bicycle pump, like how did they do that in the 50s?
Yeah, like an air tire pump. They're pump.
They were pumping his. He was having all this, like, it sounded like he was having acid and reflux. I mean, I've never read in any book what his diagnosis was, but he lost sleep. He would vomit. He couldn't hold food down. He was constantly in pain with his stomach. Yeah.
For the last year or last 3 years or what?
I think it first started happening in 54. Ooh. And I think it was chronic by 55.
That's rough.
And I think even the day before he died, in order to relieve his pain, they pumped his stomach. Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pray to
if your stomach hurts so bad that you're pumping it, trying to get the bile out or whatever, I mean, that's pretty bad.
Oh, I've been there. I've been there with it. Mm-hmm. And I know you've suffered some stomach issues too. That's really bad.
Yeah. So he's the patron pope of stomach ailments.
Yeah.
So he was, I think they also say that he Pius XII used to love the pageantry and the liturgy. You look at some of those early Pius XII where he's got his arms. He does that a lot with his arms open, with his head up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where he's embracing the world. He loves that. There's so many photo ops where he's just looking solemn, or he's got his hand up, or when he's he's lifted up in the chair. I mean, there's a lot of some of the greatest photography we have of the papacy. Actually, probably the greatest photography is Pius XII.
Yeah. Yeah. He knew how to gesticulate.
Yeah.
Like an Italian.
Yeah, exactly. But they say after 55, he started to not want to do any of that. He didn't want longer liturgies. He wanted to abbreviate. He wanted less pageantry, less show. And so I don't know if that's just, you feel like you're going to throw up the entire time. So you're like, yeah, let's kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
let's not do the third and fourth verse of that closing hymn.
Yeah, right. Sunrise, sunset. That would be the Novus Ordo version.
Right.
We can only do the first 11 verses. We'll skip the latter 11.
Exactly.
Wait, question. So was did you cover the predictions of Pius XII in the 30s in your book at all?
Back when he was Pacelli, when he says people will look in vain for the light.
Red lamp.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did. It's a really...
You vet those? Yeah.
I probably spent about 25 minutes of my life trying to validate that quote because it's such a money quote and it is on the internet everywhere. Everybody quotes that quote because it seems like a prophecy of the Novus Ordo, right? Where you won't ever find the sanctuary lamp, tabernacle will be taken away, they'll strip the altars, strip the sanctuaries, right? Mm-hmm. I did trace it down to a French, was it a French? I think it was a French book. And apparently it was said, not written, to, I think, a count or a duke. And so I did trace it down, but it's not like one of those where you can say, oh, he wrote it in this essay or book.
Which would have been better, yeah.
Which would have been better, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you want it, folks, and you get the book, you can look up the footnote. And I think I have discovered the oldest, best citation for that quote by Pacelli, who became Pius XII.
Yeah, get his book. Sounds like you did good research.
Have you
ever had people that they're like, you wrote a book? Cool. Would you send it to me in Word docs, one page at a time? Like, just go buy it, dude. Like, could I have a look at that? Like, just print out the Word doc. I don't mind. I'm like, but I might. I mean, I kind of need you to buy it if you want to read it.
Right.
So please just
this book,
each of us
basically this book of so much of the stuff that we've talked about on these shows, Sankt Gallen Mafia, Bugnini, all of these controversies. And I knew some of the stuff in there is so mind blowing. It's beyond what we've talked about on these shows. I mean, we'll do shows on it when the book comes out, but it's so mind blowing. I felt that I needed to just proliferate footnotes because people are, this is bull. There's no way. So
Yeah.
I went
It's
to
important.
PhD doctrinal dissertation mode and just like footnoted. So there's like 2 or 3 footnotes every page of this book. I wanted it to be.
That's
I didn't
necessary.
want it to be one of these, trad websites you go to and it's just like all this stuff, and you're like, well, okay, so you
What's
say
your
Padre.
citation? They're like, we got it here in your face. And it's like their brother trad website. And then it's like infinite regression. You're like, dude, you're going to make me look like an idiot because I, unlike you, actually want to cite this stuff. It's true,
Right.
but yeah, that's what your book will be, a very valuable
Yeah.
resource if you went into PhD research mode.
And in
What you
some
kept telling
places,
me
I
you
just
did.
say this is not attested. For
Right.
example, I really wanted the quote where Padre Pio in 1963 says to
Right.
Monsignor Luigi, Freemasonry is entered into the slippers of the Pope,
Right.
referring to Paul VI. That
Right.
quote is all over the internet. Sometimes it says slippers, sometimes it says loafers. Just not attested. I couldn't find one printed book in the universe that has that quote in it. But
No,
it's
I've
on a
looked for that one
gazillion.
once.
It's on a gazillion trad sites.
Yeah, and half the people, not half, some of our viewers out there are like shaking their fists, like, "What's the problem with that?" If it's just on a bunch of trad websites, it's like you want to check the provenance, people.
Right.
And the way he should have said "slipped into the slippers" or "loafed into the loafers." That
Maybe
could
he
be a
did.
translation issue.
Maybe
Yeah.
he did. Yeah, so if anybody's got
checked
the
on that one,
actual legit quote of that, I couldn't find it. I spent maybe 15 minutes of my life trying to find it, looking it up. And, because some of these you got to actually go into Italian and you got to go into French and,
I know.
chase these things down. And so if anybody's got it, I read all these comments eventually. Well, in the first few days I do. After that, I stop reading them. Send me a comment. I want to find that quote. Maybe I can slip it into the manuscript before publication date, but I couldn't attest to it. Anyway, all of that giant tangent is just to say that in the late 1950s, when Danneels was being formed, wasn't all that great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something to remember too. You're like, oh, this book, this author, this Catholic book I'm reading, it was published in 54. It must be legit. No, not necessarily. A lot of people think Vatican II was this hinge, and like everything before 68 was just awesome.
Right.
100% Orthodox, and then after 65, everything was just crud. Not so easy. If only it were that easy.
They set up. It was a distinction of degree, not a distinction of kind at the council, because
Right.
they'd been setting up for it for X number of decades. And Archbishop Fulton Sheen was already hated among the liberals in America in the 50s.
That's right.
I don't know how much beyond that, but yeah,
Well,
for sure.
Pius X is railing against the modernists. 1907.
Right.
Leo the 13th against the liberals.
This stuff didn't come ex nihilo, right?
That's
the
right.
liberalism in the church had to be set up. It had to be all that Alta Vendita language of it'll take 100 years. The soldier will die and the fight will go on. So that's
Alta
what
Vendita.
your book
Yep.
certainly accounts. Yeah. So I mean, Danneels is raised in this climate. And again, another thing people often say in the comments is like, oh, don't tell me. I had, 12 years of Catholic education, and I had it again. I had it in the 50s or 60s before the council. It's like, it was in the water. All this stuff was being set up.
That's right. I mean, who are the people? Who are the Monsignors and the Father Bobs and the, Sister Mary Lucy who threw off the veil and tore out the communion rails and brought in the guitars? All those priests and nuns who were ordained and consecrated in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
That was them.
You think that stuff would have flown if they were if they were ordained under the correct auspices with the proper formation? I mean, you could always go rogue, but going rogue doesn't happen around the world like that at once with well-formed people. There had to be some, at least, fly in the ointment in the formation of these people beforehand, so that they could stick a bigger fly in the ointment.
You know, I've thought about this before, and I really believe that no matter how well formed you were, if you were in 1969 or 1970 and, you know, you were a little girl who wanted to be a nun and you really wanted to be a bride of Christ and you were formed well, or you were a priest and you really wanted to offer the holy sacrifice and have your hands consecrated and touch the host. Let's say you're just completely well formed. 1969, 1970, 71, when the Pope, the vicar of Christ, starts telling you, this is okay, we need to do this. The early church had freestanding altars, so the priest should face the people. The young people, we need to keep the young people in the church after Woodstock. Let's bring in some guitars. Obviously, there were people who were well-formed who are like, no, this is wrong. This is sacrilegious. But the great majority of them said, yeah, this is right. I think I just think looking back on it and being caught up in it, you know, it are two different things. It's easy for us to say, well, didn't you see that this was going to lead to mass attendance declines and that communion in the hand was going to lead to most Catholics in the pews saying that the Eucharist is just a symbol. We all see that in retrospect. But I think in the moment, you know, and a lot of it was a frog in a pot. Many of these things, if you look at the timeline of all the changes in the Mass, you know, it started in 63, 64. And even in 1970, when the Novus Ordo was around, unless you lived in Belgium where Danneels was, you couldn't have communion in the hand yet.
Right.
You may have heard about it, but you didn't see it. It was still on the tongue.
Right.
And the altar rail probably wasn't ripped out in 1970. It was probably ripped out in 76, 77 in your parish. So it was a frog in a pot. So I think we should have some charity towards these people who, you know, went off the reservation. But there were also people like Bugnini, like Bea, who were actively with the master of puppets, with the strings, setting this thing up. They knew what they were doing. The Jesuits, the bad Jesuits, they knew what they were doing.
For sure.
So, Danneels.
I think this sticks out a little bit. Mm-hmm. Danneels only got an A- in canon law. It's reported here. I think that's funny because canon law is not known as the most difficult thing you can study. And the A- in canon law, he was probably like, yeah, so here's what we should do. We're in a couple decades, we should change the code of canon law. We should change the age of you know, the punishment for offenses
molesters.
against minors.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know what? I had you down for an A, Mr. Danneels. I think I'm moving this to A-.
A-. Yeah. When they say he had an A- in canon law, are they bragging or revealing a weakness?
Wikipedia was saying it was good. They're like, he got great grades. He was magna cum laude in his licentiate at the Greg, which is also what I wound up with magna. I was just this much under summa. I was like less than a tenth of a point under summa. But they're bragging, and they're like, he also earned an A- in canon law. It's like, ooh, that's not good. The writer of the wiki article. Canon law, you should be getting an A, bro.
That seems like one of the these cardinals have their stump jokes and stories that they tell at all their fundraiser dinners. That sounds like one of them that you would use if you were a cardinal.
Yeah,
back when I was at the Greg, I made an A- in canon law, and all the like blue hair ladies like laugh like ha 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 while they get out their checkbooks, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is one of those. But I mean, all of his friends would know, like, you should have made an A, bro.
All right.
It's canon law. Come on, it ain't hard stuff.
He was studying the 1917 canon law.
Yeah. That's why he got the low grade. I surmise.
Right. If it had been 1983 canon law, he would have got A+.
He like wrote the book. He's like,
That's
hey,
right.
I love this 83 code. Soft.
So it also says here that he was allegedly involved in writing Sacrosanctum Concilium, but this is dubious. But he did play a very active role in implementing the liturgical forms of Sacrosanctum Concilium.
That's interesting.
All over Belgium and abroad. And,
Yeah.
communion in the hand was originally only allowed to Belgium, Holland, France, and Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also in the book, I found and traced out every single year for every nation getting the indult for communion in the hand. Like South Africa. It's like a timeline. There's communion in the hand. But it all starts in Belgium.
Right.
So, it's kind of surprising. If you look back in time, the Belgian Catholics were pretty hardcore. They were major advocates of like the Immaculate Conception back before it was cool to be into the Immaculate Conception.
Right.
And they have some really, solid theology and saints and bishops. But I think by the time Danneels is around,
it's changing.
They're dubious.
Yeah, well, he was part of the change. I mean, the change I think in Belgium happened a little before him, but a lot of it has to do with Louvain. See, Louvain's interesting because half of Louvain is like it's basically a secular campus. I guess it's called Leuven. They call that one Leuven.
Yeah, I've always been confused on that. I never been to Belgium, so I'm not. Well, there's Leuven, there's Louvain. I think Louvain is totally different.
They're separated, but they're near each other. The two campuses are either adjoined or basically almost adjacent. My friend that I studied philosophy with at Rome, he actually went and he visited Louvain, and he said it's got this. The two universities relate to each other really oddly because one's secular and one's Catholic.
Huh. Okay.
Anyway,
it says here Louvain is the French name for Leuven, which is the capital of the province of the Flemish Brabant.
Right.
So the only thing I really liked about the Flemish is their art. Like the Flemish masters.
Yeah.
That's some great art.
Yeah, it was flamingly good Flemish art. But Danneels not only attended Louvain. The quick point I was making is that he was eventually head of the nation's Catholic military ordinariate as vicar, and he was chancellor at Louvain for a short while after he'd become bishop. Which I didn't know any of this stuff. I mean, so he's got. He appears by all measures, by all the facts we've already read about the guy's life. He was a made man earlier on. I mean, it doesn't sound unlike the story of McCarrick when, you go through and
Exactly.
It's like, yeah, you're one of the few. You want to do this stuff? We can make you a superstar.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like we got here.
Did you know, McCarrick was never a pastor, ever. He got to Cardinal of D.C. and was never a pastor of a church.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So in Danneels, he's probably most famous because he gets in his ascent he gets associated with the royalty and nobility of Belgium, and in 1990, King, oh boy, I'll just say the King of Belgium. He refused to sign the law liberalizing abortion because he was a Catholic. This is in 1990, folks. It was passed by their parliament, and it was a major crisis in the politics. But Danneels and the prime minister knew this was going to be an issue because apparently the king's a real Catholic. This is what real Catholic politicians do. We're not talking about politicians here. We're talking about a king.
Right.
And Danneels goes in there as a bishop in the Catholic Church. He's like, hey, it's going to be okay if you sign that.
Right.
What?
It's not actually as bad as it seems, the whole murdering children all around the country. So go ahead and do it. And he got him to, though. That's the thing. The king was holding out, right? But then he goes for it. So
yeah, I've heard of this before. I was told by a friend who's in the medical community that in 1968, 69, 70, after Humanae Vitae, there were many Catholic gynecologists who were not sure what to do, right? And an urban myth, and that's not an urban myth, it's a real story that I'd heard here in Dallas, is that a very prominent gynecologist was close to the Bishop of Dallas and had him over for dinner to discuss this issue. And the bishop's like, yeah, just do what just follow your conscience. If people ask for things that are contrary to the Catholic Church, you're a medical doctor. You can't refuse them care. You're kind of special in that way. Yeah. And so and then I think either his son or daughter, who also went on to become a gynecologist, repeats this tale.
Wow.
Right? That the family was conflicted. The papal document says this. Our profession puts us in a uncomfortable situation. The bishop says, don't worry about it. You're a medical doctor. That's kind of the thing here. We have a Catholic king who's following his Catholic formation, Catholic doctrine, right. And a cardinal comes by and says, yeah, don't worry about it. You represent the nation. The nation's not Catholic anymore, so sign the bill.
Right. Follow your conscience. The funny thing is that libs get away with this. They're like, what does your conscience tell you? And the King of Belgium's like,
don't do it.
You kidding me, dude? My conscience told me that the murdering babies is wrong, right? And then he's like, yeah, but the thing is, some people's consciences tell them that it's not wrong. And the king was probably like, well, yeah, they're people with badly formed consciences. They're evil. And then Danneels like, look, we've been talking about this forever. It's like, no, this is a 20-second conversation. We can't go back and forth all night. Just sign the bill. Abortion is okay.
Yeah. So that's not good. Now, it's also interesting that he and some Belgian bishops also issued a declaration in which they distinguished what is legally acceptable and what is morally desirable.
Yep.
And this is a strategy you've seen more and more. You see it in Amoris Laetitia, that, yes, there are these moral ideals, what's morally desirable. Right. Of course, every family would be a male and a female who are lovingly married and having 12 kids, economically sound, a minivan and a Suburban in the driveway, large house, great benefits, retirement package, dental plan. That's what we want for everybody.
That's the ideal.
But since 99% of people can't have this ideal situation, we have to follow our conscience and realize we do need to limit family size. Wink, wink. We're not going to tell you how to do that, but we think you should limit your family size. And so on and so forth. What bothers me is how many contraceptive acts, abortions, premarital, extramarital sexual encounters have happened because bishops wink, wink at people.
Well, there are at least two categories in which this happens. There's the wink, wink, you can contracept. And then if your bishop's wink, winking at you in the other sense, then
that's not good.
That's even worse.
Yeah. Run away. If you're a seminarian, run away. Yeah.
Either context is bad because they'll do the wink wink with a married man in the confessional if you're like, oh yeah, we're don't contracept, but was tempted this time to contracept. Please give me the grace, or whatever whatever your private confession is. It's challenging in the modern world not to do whatever. And they're like, look, you're a good guy. I'm like, wait, what is this? Am I talking to like Tony Robbins here or what? I literally heard from the other end of the confessional, like the auditory wink, wink, which is like, look, you're a good guy. You're one priest is telling me you're a teacher. You already have kids. Like, go ahead and do it. I'm like, no, we're reversing roles here, Father. No, you can't do it. I was just praying for graces or whatever.
Yeah. Or what's the guy on Saturday Night Live back in the day? Is it Stuart Smiley? You're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, people like you.
You're huggable. Oh, you're that's right. People like you. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what confession's for.
Right. Yeah. I want to read this quote from Danneels on abortion. I'd be interested to get your take on it, Tim. He says, a society that encourages abortion of those that are born in the margins of society or that do not have the chance to be that did not have the chance to be loved, abandoned its humanizing role and ultimately condemns itself, end quote. Okay, so this is a true statement, but it is full of this lingo, the buzzwords that these bishops use constantly, where you hear it said or written, and you're like, what does this mean? I mean, I can hardly read the sentence.
Yeah, so many comma clauses.
Yeah, born in the margins of society. I mean, I think they're born in hospitals, mostly. Right. Right? And then even if you're like completely homeless, your child's going to be born in the hospital. Like every Euro Western country provides for that. Right. And then it abandons its humanizing role. What does that mean?
Who does the abandoning?
The society.
Who's the subject of that sentence?
The society that encourages abortion of those who are born in the margins.
They're the ones that abandon it. Yeah, I don't know what that means. Yeah. Sounds like he's justifying abortion for part of this quote, then the other part he comes out against.
It's not a strong statement against abortion, but it's not. I would say if someone questioned me on the news, I'd say abortion is the murder of innocent children. It's contrary to the fifth commandment. It's contrary to natural law. It's contrary to the revealed religion given to us by Christ or the apostles. It is evil. It is an intrinsic evil. It must be stopped at all levels of society. What else would you like to know about? I would not say it causes our society to abandon its humanizing role and ultimately condemns itself. What does it mean it condemns itself?
Yeah, I don't know. Like you suffer by not having lots of kids around. I mean, again, in some sense, Europe has condemned itself by contraception and abortion so much. But he's not saying that clearly. Even that's a clear way to say that. So it just means to sound like it'll punish itself.
Human persons don't know. Like, have you ever tried with your kids to let them choose their punishment?
I don't think
it backfires, man. You're like, I want to see how morally advanced my child is. So they get in trouble. You're like, what should be your punishment? They always say, I don't know. And then when you really push them on, like, go outside for a little while. Like, what?
Go outside and play, but only you get to use half of your toys.
Right.
Yeah, I never tried that one. I knew where.
Try it sometime just for a laugh. Just so you can report back to us on what the little Gordons decided would be their apt punishment for what their crime.
Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, but I'm going to have an alternate punishment lined up.
Like, of course. Yeah. This is just research.
No food for a week. Yeah. Danneels probably wouldn't have been the harshest punisher, I'm guessing. Hearing what he says about abortion.
That's right. Now, Danneels, we did a show talking about Danneels a lot we've done two actually on the Sankt Gallen Mafia. And Danneels gets involved in 1999. And we can't prove it, but you have a good theory on this, Tim. You said that you believe the Sankt Gallen Mafia began to have their annual meeting when John Paul II first started showing signs of illness.
Right.
You'd said that in a previous show. I never heard anyone say that before. It was really good that he started to show some weakness around late 90s. And so that's when the vultures come out.
There's stated, Danneels himself said that they met starting in 96. And I think you and I were saying, why 96? And I was saying, well, this is when JP2 is slowing down or starting to show, that the Parkinson's and whatnot. So, because he said Danneels himself in his biography that came out during the synodal process, 2014 to 2015, he said we had this thing, we called it Mafia Club or Sankt Gallen Mafia, and we would meet once a year, which is not that often, in Sankt Gallen Switzerland, starting in the year 1996 through the first conclave. And I guess they did one meeting after the first, the conclave, which gave us Pope Benedict. And the express goal, of course, of the Sankt Gallen Mafia, we've talked about it so much here today, we're not articulating it even once, but the express goal was to avoid a Ratzinger papacy. Yeah, so I think the only logical takeaway is they were meeting to avoid that Ratzinger papacy, which they were not able to obviate. And they only started when they thought JP2 was going to die or die soon. Yeah. But yeah, the stated meeting time was 1996. Now, were all of these guys, Martini and Cardinal Casper and Cardinal Danneels here, and the whole crew, Ivo Führer, were all of them new to Sankt Gallen? Ivo Führer was the Metropolitan there, but were they all new? Had they never been to Sankt Gallen? This is where the connection between these Sankt Gallen guys and McCarrick has been widened and deepened over the last few months with, even testimony from people we've had on this show, like James Grine. No, they probably had been there before because McCarrick had been there for at least 4 decades, 3.5 to 4 decades. This is what needs to be looked into. Did you?
You don't want to reveal. I've got it. I don't want to reveal today, but I've got it.
Do you really?
I've got the case on why Sankt Gallen, why they're being there. Yeah.
In the book?
In the book. Infiltration. It's Führer it's the Bishop of Sankt Gallen, Führer, who invites Martini initially.
Really?
So Martini, and I talk a lot about Martini in the book, Cardinal Martini, he really is he's the architect for the Bergoglian Pope Francis papacy.
Führer is?
No, Martini.
Martini, yeah, I thought it was Martini. Yeah.
Cardinal Martini is the spiritual and philosophical father to, not like they hung out all the time, but Cardinal Martini, I'm convinced, would be exactly the same as Pope Francis. Yeah. Same encyclicals, same posture to the world, same dress, eschewing the papal apartments, all that stuff. I think Martini would be lockstep with all of that. It's just that Martini was older and he died. You know? And so Bergoglio was the obvious number 2.
Right.
So,
well, but even at the beginning of, I think because he's older, this is how it works in the Cardinal. It seems to work. I mean, this is a bit of speculation, but I have plenty of ground to make this assumption. When a guy's old, it's not just get Cardinal Martini into the papacy. They said all along, Danneels, this comes directly from that biography of Danneels where he first gave us the term Sankt Gallen Mafia. He said there was only one for us. So even if he is baby Martini, this young guy from young blood from Buenos Aires, they don't want to groom. They don't want to wind up with the kind of situation that the conservatives had with John Paul II, like an old guy where you're trying to initiate reform, So they're like, let's get a baby Martini, and this is Buenos Aires Bergoglio.
Yeah, one of the things that they didn't fully originally understand with John Paul II is when you have an ailing, sick pope, yes, that allows people to manipulate the papacy, as in Pius XII in the last few years. However, it also allows other people to subvert your work. And they felt that Ratzinger had subverted their work. They're like, great, John Paul II is getting older. Now we can get to work because he's sick. Well, Ratzinger was there and he stopped some of this stuff. Like, well, we don't want Ratzinger to be the Pope. Yeah, so it's not necessary that it's better to have one of your own men who's liberal and young than it is to have an ambiguous character who's sick and old.
Right.
Sadly, this is how people think of things.
We skipped this part though, as in the jumble of names we're throwing out here. I just throw out JP2. JP2 is the one that elevated Danneels. So,
Yep.
I mean, we've talked
that?
about this before. I think it's 82. I can double check. I think it's 1982.
83.
83. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and this is in his sound mind, you know,
Yes.
some of the neoconservative Catholics out there that are really trying hard as more of this stuff, TNT type stuff, comes to light, which it has been pretty much all of the fall, right? Fall and Christmas, I guess, with more James Grind stuff. They're trying to protect the legacy of JP2. And this is a difficult thing to do. So now they're trying to move back the sick, you know, how many years he was sick. And they're like, arguably, maybe it was even all of the 90s and, you know, into the 80s. It's like, well, I mean, you can only be sick. He was Pope a very long time, and he was well and non-infirm of body for many of those years. Still a handsome cat, you know, like in the 80s. I've heard them try to say as far back as the late 80s he was getting sick. It's like
The problem. Yeah, he was diagnosed Parkinson's in 2001, I believe, but it's clear that he was suffering from it before. It's not like all of a sudden Parkinson's switches on. So I would grant them even late 90s. The problem is, and you showed this in one of our previous videos of his cardinal appointments in the 80s, are pretty sour. They're not real great. And then in doing this book, Infiltration, I noticed, because I studied all the years in the progress of John Paul II, I noticed an oddity emerge in his papacy in 1982-83. And I don't know why that is. There's no trigger. The only trigger I can see is that there's the assassination attempt in 81 and then in 82.
Right.
And I don't know if that just rattled him so much. But, you know, in 83, 84, you see he receives the sacred ashes from the Hindu. He participates in the animist, you know, thing. There's pictures of all this in Africa. He preaches the first papal sermon in a Lutheran church. I think that's 83 or 84. Goes into the synagogue. It's 83, 84. So a lot of his really extreme advanced ecumenism, and even like I said, receiving ashes from a Hindu shaman or whatever they call him, that's troubling to me. And 83 is when he issues the new Code of Canon Law, which does not as strictly condemn and enforce against sexually active priests. It removes sodomy from that code. 83 is when he changed the canonization process and took out devil's advocate.
Oh, right.
That was 83. I mean, I do it in the book, but a whole new book could be written on, you know, the first 10 years of John Paul II and tracing these kind of things. And it seems to me that 83 is the key year. 86 is when he does the Assisi meeting and the Dalai Lama places a Buddha on a tabernacle in a Catholic church in Assisi.
Wait, how many? There were 3 Assisi meetings, right?
There's 3. The first one was 86.
First one was 86. I thought the first one was earlier. 86, and then he goes back.
There was a second John Paul one where he's more gray, he's older. And then I don't know the year off the top of my head. I mean, there's the third Assisi is with Benedict XVI, red pill right there.
Right.
And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Assisi is, let's get 28, I can't remember the exact number, world religions and pray together at Assisi for world peace.
Right.
And it seems that at least in 1986, the Pope was like, hey, yeah, y'all can use some of our altars, tabernacles, and chapels to worship your false gods in. Did you know that chapel, the Dalai Lama, he placed the idol of Buddha on the tabernacle. The other day on Twitter, Patrick Coffin called someone out. He's like, "Oh, come on, is that really happened? You know, the Dalai Lama, yes, I've got the footnote in the new book. It's New York Times reports on it.
New York. Yeah, New York Times.
New York Times, like the next day,
I've never seen it.
Reports on it. Yeah, I quote the story. But later on, the roof of that chapel collapsed and destroys that tabernacle and that altar. Did you know that? In Assisi.
No, I didn't know
There was
that.
an earthquake and that chapel fell in on itself, the one that the Dalai Lama worshipped the Buddha in. So God was not pleased.
Everything the Dalai Lama had touched is like what gets crushed. Yeah, Benedict actually didn't break with John Paul over that, but Benedict was mad about Assisi 1 or 2, or maybe both.
A lot of people were mad about Assisi 1.
Certainly.
Because
Benedict was not on board. Or Ratzinger, obviously.
I think he was reluctant about it, but he clearly did Assisi 2 and Assisi 3.
He did 2? I thought he wasn't at 2.
Oh, maybe he wasn't at 2.
He did 3 in whenever, but yeah.
He was already prefect of CDF, Holy Inquisitor, in 86. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. A lot of people were outraged. I mean, there's the famous picture, too, of the 2 Native American chiefs who come out and like light up their pipe in front of the Pope and smoke it up on the podium.
Yeah.
Their peace pipe. They're like, this is how we pray, bro. And they're like,
yeah, exactly. Just in the sanctuary.
I don't know. I think that was actually outside.
Oh,
but yeah, I mean, it was there with the Pope. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and the New York Times apparently says the crowd loved that one. There was a lot of like celebration applause when the Native Americans and they had the huge headdresses on, and they're like token on the peace
pipe.
All
the morons are chest bumping. You know, I mean, anytime, you know how you remember even in high school, it's like anytime someone says anything about smoking, all the morons are like, yes. You know, you know, the New York Times isn't falsely reporting that. They think that's all the morons get excited when someone starts smoking anything.
Yeah.
It was a catastrophe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
those early 80s. So again, you know, if you're going to say, well, John Paul was sick, you have to say, well, when he received ashes from the Hindu shaman or the African animists, all that stuff, that was 83. I mean, he'd been in the papacy for 5 years. And when he appoints Godfrey Danneels to the Red Hat as a cardinal, that's 83 also.
Right. It's early, though. I mean, that's the
early.
point. The point is it's really early. And no matter how far back you want to stretch, you want to reasonably stretch the Parkinson's, because it is a bit of a distinction of degree. You're having, you know,
right.
Brain disruption, brain functional disruption, not just when you get the diagnosis, but as a distinction, you know, a broadening, there's a broadening line, you know, of degradation to the way that your brain can function. It's the 80s was like his, you know, those were his salad days, right?
That's right.
Come on, you can't make this claim. So if all this stuff is true, which it is about all the bad people, we need to put a pin actually in that show where we went through all of the JP2 Episcopal ordinations and the elevations to the cardinalate. We really need that because we did a good job, and I've even looked.
Yes.
I forget what research we were looking at. I can't find it
you didn't write it down?
I didn't write it down. Show notes, I usually they're in the next day's garbage here at the Gordon household. But we'll
save
find
all my
it.
notes.
And people, if you know, write in the comments what show we did JP2's appointments. Because they're really early. And
I want to say it was the red
bad.
pill with Pope Francis. No, that wasn't it. No, it wasn't that show. I don't know. We'll try to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, one thing we didn't mention so far was probably the most famous Vatican II theologian that was Belgian was Father Edward Schillebeeckx.
Oh, yeah.
Schillebeeckx is the guy who said when we wrote the documents, we included ambiguity in the documents of Vatican II, and we knew after the council how we would interpret them.
Right. So Schillebeeckx is Belgian. Now, there is a little incident where Schillebeeckx is
is tried by the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith in 78, and it said that Cardinal Danneels did not intervene on Schillebeck's behalf. So he didn't help him.
Right.
You would expect him to help him, but he didn't. But
well, anybody out there that's played, there's a game called what's it called? The Secret Hitler. You know, it's like a board game.
How do you play that?
Oh, it's so you most of the people are liberals, German liberals, and then other people are fascists, and there's one Hitler. And the name of the game is it's actually a really fun game, board game. You kind of assume everyone's a liberal, a minority are fascists, and they're trying to get Hitler into power. And basically the idea is throughout most of the game that the secret fascists vote for liberal policies because you don't want to out yourself as a fascist. So for most of the game, and I mean, I think this is very telling. It's almost like wargaming. You know, guys, military generals are known for wargaming because it's, you know, what changes in real time, the oddities and the contingencies of warfare, the oddities and contingencies of life that come up like that you can't plan for are little accidental things. But the broad, you know, strategy that goes into an actual war or an ideological war, which is really what we're talking about, the ideological war the liberals brought to the church, those don't change much, especially the more that you can write in the accidents, you know, and anticipate them. So, yeah, I think when we talk about things like Cardinal Danneels not covering for Schillebeck's or whatever, is because he doesn't want to out himself, right? Secret fascist. You at a certain point, and this is what you even start doing in the game. It's kind of like wargaming. You automatically you have to dump your guy under the bus. Right. If you're on the team fascist, you're like, you condemn him like everyone else, and you're allowed to talk smack in this game. So you're like, oh, get out of here. You know, once someone's known as a fascist, I think, you know, Schillebeck's was the generation prior, and it was time, you know, his time had come.
Yeah, he had, by the late 70s, he and Hans Kung and all those guys had gone off the reservation. I mean, Schillebeck's was taught he didn't teach, he denied transubstantiation, or maybe didn't deny it, but said that's no good. We got to have transsignification. That was his theory. So that the bread no longer signifies bread, it signifies the body of Christ. It's a sign of the body of Christ. That's what he taught.
It's crazy.
Transsignification. Give me a break. He also taught that the resurrection of Christ had nothing to do with a corpse, he said.
Right.
That it's more of Jesus rising in our own faith in him. Like, what? This is Protestant Easter Sunday sermon.
Symbolism. It is. It's like what all the pastors were saying around the world after Francis had said it. Pope Francis had said it about the fishes and the loaves, right? It was really the real miracle was the miracle in our hearts. Liberals love this in at least two ways. One, you're denying the miracles and basically Christ's divinity. So they really love that. And then two, they get to use all their fruity language, go out and have an encounter with a rainbow language. Right.
It's the real miracle was everybody was sharing and caring. Mm-hmm. And can we do that miracle in our midst too? Can we encounter one another and share and care? It's like, come on. Like,
I would never not.
Here's the quote from Schillebeck's. He was talking about the empty tomb is an unnecessary hypothesis, since an eschatological bodily resurrection, theologically speaking, has nothing to do with a corpse.
Wow.
Pretty sure that the entire New Testament disagreed with you on that, bub.
It's got a lot to do with the corpse. Yeah.
yeah.
Not to mention he's applying Occam's razor. You hear that? He's applying Occam's razor, which is the favorite sort of Reformation move. He's saying it's nominalism, an unnecessary extra. Yeah. He's nominalistically saying there's an unnecessary extra assumed premise in the equation here. We should get rid of all such premises.
Right. Yeah.
Why do you need the corpse? That's the ugly part.
Yeah. It's Gnostic too. It's like, you hear these kind of homilies, especially like liberal mainline Protestant. They'll say stuff like, well, when we say Jesus rose from the dead, what we mean is he lives on in our hearts.
Right. Right. Which
right.
is typical.
So when there was an earthquake and the tomb opened and there's angels and all that, that's what they came down to tell us? No.
Well, they're like, no, the angels are our heart's consolation, also in our hearts.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's all symbolic for them.
I know.
mean,
it's transsignification. Schillebeeckx. But Schillebeeckx was a Belgian. He was a Dominican, for crying out loud. How can a Dominican go so off the rails?
I know, but they have. Lots of them have.
Lots of them have, yeah. So
neo-scholasticism.
Yeah, neo-scholasticism. No, thank you.
If someone wants, like, if someone uses neo or new in the thing, and you're like, okay, you're a neo-Platonist, why not just Platonism? Neo-Thomist, why not just Thomism? Neo-scholasticism, why not just scholasticism? So it goes, it's all obvious.
Why does everything in the 1960s have to be neo and new?
New or second Pentecost is what John Paul II was calling it.
I guess it's just
neo,
a hate.
New, second.
It's a hate of elders.
Yeah.
That generation, that whole, that, they said, we're going to go be hippies. First they're going to be beatniks with their berets on and all that and turtlenecks. And then they're hippies, and everything before was just junk to them. Yeah. And so it's hard to teach a traditional religion, Catholicism, when you're saying, what people said in the 1200s was dope.
Right. Well, and hard to teach a traditional religion, impossible to convey the beauty of a magisterium to these people, because that vests both the tradition and the personnel, right? And it's this pyramidal personnel structure, org chart. Right. They do not like that. I mean, liberals today, they don't know much about the church. Like Archbishop Fulton Sheen said, there are a million people that think they hate it, only a few actually hate it. I think he's wrong. I think there are people that actually know what it is and hate it for what it is.
And hate it, yeah.
But what they're really rebelling against is that pyramidal structure of the magisterium. They do not like it.
Yeah. One of the things we didn't discuss was Danneels on gay marriage and Danneels on liberation theology. I think if we talk about that a little bit, people realize why Danneels and the Sankt Gallen Mafia wanted Bergoglio, Pope Francis, in the papacy. Which one do you want to do first, liberation theology or gay marriage?
Sure, let's do liberal. I mean, people could probably guess where he was on gay marriage. But it should be said, Bergoglio was actually better on liberation theo than Danneels. Right.
Maybe. Well, was he?
This is part of that Peronism. Well, here, you do your thing, and then we'll analyze after. Yeah.
Well, the very fact is that Danneels was a fan of liberation theology, but they always do this. They're always like, liberation theology is great, it's good enough, but we gotta not go too far. They always say that. Right.
But that means
when it comes to picking up AK-47s, we draw the line.
Right.
You're like, okay, thanks for making that clarification. But why are you wearing a Shea t-shirt? It's like
these guys.
So
he was actually worse than some of the Euros, like Danneels, some of the French and Belgians, and I forget where else the major supporters of it came from. They're actually worse than Bergoglio. Bergoglio has a decently solid record on it, probably not for the right reasons, but he actually in Buenos Aires was known as a kind of hunter of the many surrounding liberation theologians. This is one of those facts in Sir Sears' book that
Dictator Pope.
Dictator Pope.
Yeah, because there's
kind of confusing. It's
right. Oh, because those two
weird.
Priests get killed, and it looks like Bergoglio kind of like hangs them out. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's part of it. Yeah, that's part of the broad constellation of he was well known for 5 to 10 years as an opponent of liberation theology, which was everywhere in South America, obviously. So he had this relatively consistent stance against. And again, I think unless he's doing a real good cover job, the Euros, like Sankt Gallen Mafia people, when they are vetting him, they're probably like, you have to answer for this. We like liberation theology. Were you just covering this? It's surprising. It's one of the most surprising things I've ever learned about younger Francis in his Buenos Aires days. Remember, he still has not ever revisited Argentina in this papacy.
Right. Yeah.
Very striking. Ask why, people. It's one of them. One of them
That's
aporia.
Right. And for people who don't know what liberation theology is, it's basically the idea that just as Moses led the people of Israel into freedom, Christ leads the people of God into freedom, but it's not in the sense of eschatological or soteriological. It's not end times. It's not salvation of your soul. He's leading you out of death and sin, like St. Paul would say, in the newness of life.
Right.
That the Catholic Church and the Catholic bishops and the Catholic priest should be leading the people into political liberation.
Right.
So it's the priest and the bishop's role to guide, say, Colombians or Venezuelans or whomever into political freedom. So they're political activists, right? And it's basically a baptized socialism. But what's weird is if Pope Francis was against liberation theology, but he's very clearly pro-socialist.
Yeah, no, I know. That's what makes it. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe Bergoglio is against liberation theology. He's like, let's just be socialists. Like, let's not baptize it and pretend it to be Christian.
Right. It appears to be something like that, but where it's a weird. You'd think he would be the number one exponent in the world of liberation theology, but if you look to his record, it's like, no, he was like the boots on the ground in South America, an archbishop there. All of these guys that eventually got him, guys like Danneels, of course, in the Sankt Gallen Mafia, they got him where they wanted him to be, the ultimate throne in Christendom. They loved it. It was more a Euro thing for South America than it was at least a Bergoglian thing. So it's just weird. It just sticks out. You gotta make that point. But yeah,
well,
definitely.
I did just find this. So the godfather of liberation theology is Gutierrez. Is that how you say his name? Gutierrez.
I think so. Yeah.
On his 90th birthday in 2018, Pope Francis thanked him for his contributions to the church and humanity through your theological service and your preferential love for the poor and discarded of society. So I guess he did send him a birthday card from Hallmark last year.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So anyway, Danneels is on record promoting Gutierrez. I hope I'm saying that right. Gutierrez.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know the guy's name. That if it's Gutierrez, then that's him.
Yeah, I was told, that this has pretty much died down. John Paul II did a good job slapping it down.
Yeah,
it seems. But I've been told at CUA people are back writing theological dissertations on Gutierrez and liberation theology. It's like the new cool thing under Francis. But Danneels did step in when Gutierrez was in hot water and was under investigation. Danneels did step in and defend Gutierrez. So that's Danneels on record.
Danneels, for the record, people, he seems to be one of the more willing inhabitants of the far limb of the tree. He's one of the leftists that didn't mind sticking out. So, in other words, he was a soldier. He never minded being way out there and defending people way out there. I mean, I guess this contradicts what we said about Skilabix, but he was also the older generation. So this also means that while Danneels could be cardinal, he could never be a serious contender for Pope. He was never papabile. He was one of the extremists. And even go watch. Can we show him laughing in that video, when he's talking about his book in 2015, he's laughing as he says Mafia Club.
Is that the one where he's wearing street clothes, not clerics?
Yes. Yes, I believe so.
All right. I don't want to promise it because I'll have to go find it and cut it and put it in. We can just tell people, go Google it. But yeah, sure. he's not ashamed to say, we campaigned for Bergoglio. We met in Sankt Gallen. We called it Mafia. Ha, ha, ha.
And he's laughing. I mean, that's the thing that really struck people. Like, wait, it was a mock where you were canvassing, which is explicitly forbidden even by the 1983 code of canon law. Yeah. You're canvassing for a guy. If this guy accepted the canvassing explicitly, that could be a late sententiae excommunication.
That's correct.
Are you really this cocky, bro? And he was a cocky guy. He was one of the leftists with swagger in the hierarchy for 3 decades.
Yeah, I think they were so celebratory and so triumphalistic when Bergoglio actually got elected. I think they let a lot hang out. McCarrick and Danneels and all these guys.
They did.
And I think they've had to play a little bit of cleanup because they went a little bit too. I'm sure Francis made some phone calls like, hey, don't talk about that.
Don't say that, bro.
Sankt Gallen was our little secret.
Sankt Gallen's a big secret. And remember, who is it? Austin Ivray had to edit out of his book, like at the end of the first week of release. You just finished your book. I'm working on mine. When you release a book, people, the last thing your publisher wants to do is do another edition a week later. And they had to take out stuff. This just substantiates what you're saying, Taylor, about the level of cocksureness, right?
Yes.
How cocksure
well, not only that,
were.
but the people who wrote the biography of Danneels, it's 2 people. Their names are complicated. Saying I can't remember them. They also issued a statement. I think it was in a Belgian newspaper saying we may have overstated what we said.
Right, and they pulled
regarding
stuff
that.
out. Yeah,
yeah. So even they had to go on record and say it maybe wasn't that clear, probably because they got phone calls and they had to clean it up.
I mean, I could not believe that they were admitting this. So think about it. Without that admission, comes from pure swagger, pure hubris. We would not know any of this. I mean, would you even have written the book you just wrote if not for that admission?
If it weren't for Danneels saying that, I wouldn't have written this book, Infiltration. No.
If it weren't for Danneels saying that, no one's antennae, you on that first grind video, wouldn't have stood up when you're like, what'd you just say? Sankt Gallen? No one would have known
James
what the hell
Grind
he's
said,
talking
my
about.
family's from Sankt Gallen and we used to take McCarrick there all the time.
You were like, what?
Yeah,
I
but
wasn't in on
if
that
Danneels hadn't said that, no one would have connected those dots.
Yeah.
And when you guys, when y'all read, a priest has already he read the manuscript beforehand, and when he read the part about Sankt Gallen, what goes on in Sankt Gallen before all this happens, he could not believe it. Blew his mind. He's like, this is insane. People are going to go crazy when they read this because, man, Sankt Gallen has a little bit of a history going back to the bishops of Sankt Gallen. Anyway, we're out of time. There's when you talk about Danneels on gay marriage, here's the quote. The church has never opposed the fact that there should exist a sort of marriage between homosexuals, but one therefore speaks of a sort of marriage. But it is not true marriage, that between a man and a woman. Therefore, you have to put another word in the dictionary. But that is lawful, that the law can legitimately provide it. That's something about which the church has nothing to say, end quote. What?
What do you mean? It's a sin. The act of
this
sodomy
is exactly what liberals in America were saying. Well, let's redefine marriage. He's not saying let's redefine marriage. He's saying let's put another word in the dictionary for homosexual marriage.
Right. It's just it's a parlor trick to say marriage is definitely between one man, one woman. It's sacramental, but the church has nothing to say, i.e. there's nothing wrong with a kind of homosexual sodomistic union.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. That's all they want is to, I don't know why they care so much, to strike this out of the mortal sin category instead of being one of the prime examples.
I know why they care. Oh, we haven't talked about Danneels and him covering up for the pedophile bishop. Man, Yeah,
There's a
but
lot
I mean,
here. With
this
his
is
nephew,
this is
with his nephew.
Yeah, this is crazy because we'll get to that in just a second. By saying the church has never said anything about it. Yes, it has.
That's a lie.
Sodomy is a sin that cries to heaven. It cannot be sanctioned by the church or the state.
Of course.
But I've heard people say, this is a James Martin thing. Show me a church document that says marriage is only between a man and woman. Show me show me something from Thomas. Show me. They never had to say it.
Right. I mean, they said that
that's like me saying, show me in the church. Get out Denzinger. Get this book out. Show me where it says Doritos can't be used in the Eucharist. Yeah, show me in here where it's, show me the papal document that says no Doritos in the Eucharist and no Dr. Pepper. Show me that document.
Or show me in Denzinger where it says that Nazis are actually wicked. It's like, well, I mean, right, we're taking an application of old moral theology and we're applying it, which in application is always specific to the accidents of history. But it's dumb. It's just They know it's wrong. They're not claiming to be right. You just know you can get some of the dupes by being wrong.
Right.
We should make the closing story, though. There's so much with Danneels, and we've talked about it so much throughout so many shows. We are being more like open theological discussion relating to Danneels throughout the first half of today's show. But it's like, oh, yeah, there are all these incidents people might want to hear. We should close with
it's sad that we're running out of time because really the worst legacy of Danneels, well, besides the Sankt Gallen Mafia, is his track record on abuse for his priests in his own diocese, covering up, but also his buddy bishop who molested his own nephew.
Right.
And the nephew recorded his meeting with Danneels. Danneels didn't know it was recorded. Right. And in that, he says, you shouldn't say anything until after the bishop retires. Your uncle, the bishop, retires. Mm-hmm. So let him have an honorable retirement party.
Yeah.
And you should look at your own sins and repent of your own sins for this. He said it to the victim.
It's despicable. Yeah. So this is the guy that is in some quarters of the church being honored this week because he died late last week.
Yep.
On my birthday, actually. But yeah, what more do you say? You know, he was one of the extremists in the church, and he was one of the kingmakers. He's called the Belgian kingmaker, and he's just worked a lot of poison into the body of the faithful.
And I lament that in the first minute of this show, we did not mention that when Bergoglio, Pope Francis, walks out on the papal loggia of St. Peter's, flanked on his left side is Cardinal Danneels, right there with him.
Who I did not know, I did not recognize or would have recognized because I didn't know the name at the time that the Bergoglio papacy began. Lots of people did, though. George Weigels of the world. People all knew, okay, there's this guy, this crazy guy, Danneels, with a crazy liberal track record that was brought out there onto the loggia. What do they say about it? He wasn't front and center. He was front and left-wise, like it's a stage left a bit, but he was recognizable. I mean, that pig, you could see he's very recognizable once you know the face. So he's one of the architects that brought about the current, most recent iteration of the catastrophe, and it's all unforgivable stuff. Unforgivable.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it. Here's the quote that Danneels told the victim, the young man victim, that rather than accuse his uncle, the bishop, quote, you can also acknowledge your own guilt, end quote. That was recorded. Wow. I'm sure Danneels was horrified when he realized that had been recorded and made public. So,
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, there's people out there who are, who say to us or others, how dare you speak against the Holy Spirit? Don't you know it's the Holy Spirit who picks the popes?
Right.
The Holy Spirit does not descend as a dove onto a man's head. That's happened once in the history of the Catholic Church to denote a pope. can't remember the Pope's name. Do you remember? You ever heard of that?
I don't.
One time that happened. I want to say, well, I'm not going to say because people will say I'm wrong. That doesn't happen. Men come together and vote. And if you look at the conclaves going back for hundreds of years, there is extreme political pressure and agenda at these conclaves. And hopefully the cardinals are holy men appointed by holy popes. But sometimes that's not the case. And we get crazy things happening in conclaves. And you have guys like Godfrey Danneels canvassing, McCarrick canvassing, and both of them canvassed, they admit, in public for Bergoglio, Pope Francis. That's where we're at in the Catholic Church 2019. If you like these videos, like, subscribe, support. Anything else, Tim? Pray the Rosary?
I just want to say, pray the Rosary. Always thank you. A big thank you. I'm trying out the new headset to Mr. Boss, Anthony, the big boss, for this. And he got a little gift from Marshall, too. I'll let him don that in real time because people will enjoy his. This is my little gift. Thank you. I appreciate it. And just giving it a run today, seeing what do you people think of the new apparatus, his and mine.
I like it. All right, guys, pray the Rosary. Be full of faith, joy. Have a great Lent. Continue that fast. And the party will come at Easter when Christ really did rise from the grave. Out.